We are really happy today to be joined by Professor Efraim Inbar. He is the president for Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. He is a professor in political science at the Bar-Ilan University, and he is the founder and the first leader of the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies. We will be joined today by one of the leading academic intellectuals in Israel, and Efraim, without any further delays, the word is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you. I want to, first of all, to say shalom from Jerusalem, where I reside. And let me start saying that Turkey is a very important state in the Middle East. It has over 80 million. It's a member of the G20. It has a big economy. Its GDP is over $750 billion. It has a strategic location. It has an imperial heritage. It has a well-equipped military, part of NATO. It's the second largest army in NATO after the United States. And in contrast to other NATO members, it's ready to fight. Not everybody is ready to fight there in Europe. In the 21st century, we see a new Turkey. And I'll speak primarily about its foreign policy, but the foreign policy has domestic roots. And since 2002, Islamist party, the AKP, took over the country. At its helm, the leader is Erdogan. He is a great politician, a very charismatic person, a great speaker. He's able to animate the crowds that are come to listen to him. I'll say just 2 sentences about domestic politics. During this period, since 2002 to today, we see 2 main trends in domestic politics. One is systematic Islamization of the country. And I'll be ready to elaborate during the Q&A period about that. And as well, increased personal authoritarianism. The system turned from parliamentarian to presidential, a very centralized presidential system that fits Erdogan's wishes. In terms of foreign policy, this of course brought about Islamist overtones. And I would like to emphasize, particularly to European audiences, that religion is important in lives of people. And I know part of Europe is secular and thinks that religion is a thing of the past, but religion is very strong, particularly in the Middle East, and Turkey is not an exception. Another feature of Turkish foreign policy is its Ottoman impulses. It was an empire. It ruled over large parts of the Middle East and Europe, and it has dreams of going back to those territories. At the same time, if everybody thinks that Turkey is part of NATO, it has been distancing itself from the West and is ready to use force. Its military is all over. This type of foreign policy has also domestic functions. It basically tries to mobilize voters to Erdogan's policies, which are popular, and to distract attention from domestic problems. In the last 2 years, there are a lot of economic problems in Turkey. I will start first with mentioning examples of the Islamist dimension in Turkey's foreign policy. First of all, it's more active in the organization of Islamic countries. This is a clear departure from the Kemalist secular tradition. For 10 years, Turkey representative was Director General of the organization. Today it hosts Hamas operatives. Some of them were given recently Turkish passports, despite that the United States and parts of Europe thinks that this is a terrorist organization. It also hosts between 20,000 and 30,000 Muslim Brotherhood members from Egypt that fled Egypt after the Islamist president was removed by the General Assisi in 2013. If we check Turkey's attitude toward ISIS, the Islamic State that operated in Syria and in Iraq, it had a mixed attitude. Particularly, it was favorable when ISIS fought Kurds, which are the nemesis of Turkey, and also when it fought Syria. After all, initially, Erdogan wanted the removal of the Assad regime. The Turks allowed, of course, entrance of fighters from all over the world to Syria via Turkey. It helped logistically. It also harbored wounded people of ISIS. And all this is a well-known secret. It is also aligned with Qatar. Qatar is the mainstay, main supporter of the Muslim in the Muslim world. And of course, Qatar is a rich country, has a lot of money, it supports Turkish activities, and also has at its disposal soft power, which is Al Jazeera. Everybody knows Al Jazeera is one of the most popular networks in the Arab world, in the Muslim world. It intervenes on the sides of Islamists in various conflicts. In Libya, for example, which I'll elaborate a bit more later on. Also in Yemen, also sends weapons and money to the Lebanese Muslim Brotherhood. This is a very recent development. And now I'll try to put the map of, of the Middle East, if I'll be able to bring it back. Share screen. So we see now the Turkey here. It's a big country. It borders Syria, Iraq, Iran, this is the Caucasus countries. And I would like to say that Turkey has become a revisionist power. Erdogan rejects the Lausanne Treaty of 1923 that delineated the borders of modern Turkey. And Erdogan prefers to refer to what he calls in Turkish, it doesn't matter, the National Pact, which was passed by the last Ottoman Parliament in 1920. And this map includes also Cyprus, includes areas in Greece, includes the Aegean Islands, which are now Greek, and parts of Bulgaria, as well as areas in Syria. Already in the 30s, it annexed part of Syria, the Alexandretta region, but also Aleppo here. And also it claims parts of Iraq, the Kurdish areas, Mosul and Kirkuk, which are oil-rich. Actually, what we see in recent years, particularly since 2011, is that Turkey has capitalized on the weakness of the Arab states, and later on the decision of the US to leave the region already during Obama times, but this has been continued by President Trump to intervene. It sent troops to Iraq, to defend Muslim sites. It sent troops to Syria. Basically, all this area along the Turkish-Syrian border, about 135 kilometers, they established through 3 separate invasions, a strip of 145 kilometers, about 30 kilometers wide, which is conquered by the Turks. And there is a Turkification process there. We see the use of the Turkish lira, Yeni lira, the new lira, and also Turkish banks, Turkish language, Turkish post. They are also in Sudan here. They try to establish a port here during the time of Bashir Omar. When he was president, he was demoted and deposed in the meantime. But they are also in Qatar. If you remember, Qatar was an attempt by Saudi Arabia and the UAE to isolate Qatar because of its pro-Muslim brother policies, and this was, they became at that time a clear Turkish ally, and the Turks sent 5,000 soldiers to Qatar. They are also in Yemen. We see in Yemen the Turkish presence in Yemen, and in Somalia. Basically, they try to influence the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, particularly to compete with Saudi Arabia and Egypt. So this is Turkish presence during in the Middle East. Now I'll move to another map. Turk tried to challenge Egypt, their historic rivals. And what we'd like to concentrate now is the Eastern Mediterranean. And I'll show you a map of the Eastern Mediterranean where there is a big struggle now. And I'll show another map. This is a map of the East Mediterranean. It was published by The Economist a few weeks ago. We see here Turkey. And it seems that the struggle is over the gas fields. All those.
I think you have to open the, we can't see the map. We only see the email.
See all photos. Okay, we'll try to get to the map. I sent it before. Now. You see this map?
Yep. Although it's quite small, but just go ahead.
Now I'll try to enlarge it. Okay, we'll manage without the map in any case. As I noted before, Turkey challenged the borders. And in the Eastern Mediterranean, it is the largest power there, obviously. And it is in Cyprus. It conquered part of Cyprus, the northern part of Cyprus, already in 74. And since 2010, all those areas here we found gas, and Turkey has an appetite for this energy. They have a different interpretation of the law of the sea, and they have a big fight with Greece over it because the Greek claim an economic exclusive zone to all their islands, including Rhodes, including Crete, and the Turks do not agree with this interpretation. And we've seen some kind of Turkish diplomacy. They intervened in Libya. This is Libya here. And on the side, there is a civil war in Libya, on the side of the Islamists, and the Islamist government, the Sarraj government in Tripoli, signed an agreement with Turkey, and you can see the two brown lines. This is the economic zone of both countries, actually cutting the East Mediterranean from Egypt, Israel, and Cyprus. This was disputed by Israel as well as by Egypt, and Egypt signed afterwards in August, about a month ago, a separate agreement with Greece, and this is their agreement, those two lines, this line and this line, going all the way to Rhodes and to Crete. And of course, those two maps, the Turkish-Libyan map and the Greek-Egyptian map, they confront each other and are a good reason for clashing interests and maybe clashing even violence between Greece and Turkey. Apart from that, Turkey disputes the Cyprus economic zone here. You can see this is the border the Turks want. And they are using their navies. They have a very strong navy to make sure that their ships, their seismic ships, their research ships to find gas are operating here, and they are kicking out of the area that is claimed by Cyprus, Italian ships, even an Israeli ship. So they use force in order to make sure that the area they are claiming, nobody is encroaching. And I want to say a few words about the Libyan civil war, which is to some extent reflects a configuration of the conflict in the East Mediterranean. In Libya, after Gaddafi was removed, there is a civil war. In the eastern part of Libya, Sarraj government, which is influenced by Islamists, is in power and is fighting in the eastern part of the country, Marshal Haftar, and who is supported by Egypt, UAE, and the Russians. While the Sarraj government in the western part of the country is supported by Turkey, that sent not only its own militias, but also jihadists from Syria. And they were successful in stopping the advance of the Haftar forces toward Tripoli. Basically, it is a divided country now. The French have also intervened on part of the Egyptians, and we may see a division of the country between Egypt, the Russians, and on the other hand, the Turks, and the Islamists in the eastern part of the country. Qatar, of course, supports Turkey. So in the East Mediterranean, we see a struggle over the riches under sea, over the shores of Libya, and we see also greater tension between Greece and Turkey. We see greater tension between France and Turkey. France has intervened. It sent its airplanes to Cyprus. It is also very active in trying to bring about a change in Lebanon. And the Turks are also, of course, involved, as I mentioned before, in Lebanon, supporting the Islamists. So we may see even struggle, violent clashes between NATO members, between France and Turkey, between Greece and Turkey. So this is a source of much tension. The EU is divided on its approach. Germany tries to intervene. Germany is, of course, very sensitive to Turkish desires because it has a large Turkish minority, over 3 million, that are being Islamized by Turkey, by the way. Erdogan intervened in German elections. And Turkey is deploying its forces, and we don't know if a war will erupt. It is quite clear that Turkey has changed its NATO allegiance. It purchased S-400 surface-to-air missiles from Russia, which it's a divergence from the policy of all NATO members. So far, it doesn't balance Iran. Actually, as a result of the UAE-Israel deal, which is anti-Turkish, the Turks are becoming closer to Iran. And we've seen already in the last week meeting of high officials of Turkey and Iran trying to coordinate positions. So this is a new configuration in the East Mediterranean and in the Middle East. I would like to say a few words about the Turkish policies vis-a-vis Israel. We've seen very anti-Semitic pronouncements by Erdogan over the years. He's not a friend of the Jews. And the Turks are active also in Jerusalem. They try to undermine Israeli sovereignty there. And they are saying openly, when they turned the Hagia Sophia into a mosque, that the next target is the Temple Mount and the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. They compare Israel to Nazi Germany, interfere with Israel's attempts to cooperate with NATO. And of course, they are very vocal against the UAE-Israel agreement. And as we've seen in the East Mediterranean, they try to stop the attempt by Israel, Cyprus, and Greece to build a pipeline to Europe, to bring the energy from the East Mediterranean to Europe. And they try to force Israel to send its energy via Cyprus to Turkey in order to enhance the Turkish role as an energy bridge from the east to the west. Having said that, they are also pragmatic. There is a pragmatic streak in Erdogan's behavior. There is a bilateral trade of over $5 billion. Israel, I don't know if you are aware, Israel is a bridge for Turkey to send all its exports via the Haifa port, going afterwards to Jordan. Once they were doing it via trucks, going through the territory of Syria, now they can't do it. So they use the Haifa port. There are special arrangements to make sure that there is no smuggling of weapons into Israel. And we should note that Tel Aviv, Istanbul airline connection is one of the most lucrative connections for Turkish Airlines. before Corona, there were about 11 flights a day from Tel Aviv to Istanbul. That became a hub for many Israelis going all over the world. Israel is basically careful vis-a-vis Turkey. We don't want to turn Turkey into an enemy. It is a strong country. We should also be careful to distinguish always between Erdogan, the leader, and the Turkish people. I don't know what will happen in 2023. Then they have elections for presidential as well as parliamentary. There is a slight possibility that Erdogan will lose, but he is a formidable politician and may win, but he will not live forever. So we should not antagonize too many parts of the Turkish population. Actually, the secular elements in the Turkish society want a good relationship with Israel and also part of the Islamists. For example, the Gulenists, Fethullah Gulen, that sect, a more moderate sect than the Muslim Brotherhood in Turkey, definitely wants good relations with Israel. Now we are in alignment with Egypt, with Greece and Cyprus, UAE, in order to contain Turkish aggression. And of course, what is most important is the American role. So far, the Americans are absent. They are busy with other things. Maybe they've contributed to a ceasefire in Libya, but there is a very strong pro-Turkish faction in Pentagon as well as in State Department. And Trump, has good personal relations with Erdogan. We all know that Trump has some strange tastes. So the United States has not made up its mind yet what to do. We should try to convince them that Turkey of today is bad news. I just participated yesterday in a discussion with Greek friends, and we should try to capitalize upon the Greek lobby to do so in Washington. But after all, this is a presidential decision. And President Trump now is busy with other things. And only the United States can really moderate Turkish ambitions of the AKP and Erdogan. I will end here and I will try to answer your questions.
Thanks a lot. We already got some questions from the audience. The first question is from Simon. Please, Simon, if you turn on your mic and your camera.
Yeah. Hi, Son. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
You were talking about how Turkey wishes to regain some of the countries, or you're talking about the Ottoman Empire and how they wish to regain that ideology of some sort. Can we see any signs of Turkey wanting to regain some land that they owned before?
First of all, we know they are in Syria, which was part of the Ottoman Empire. They're also in northern Iraq, which is also part of the Ottoman Empire. They are also in Cyprus, part of the Ottoman Empire. Disputing Greek sovereignty in Zion. They establish bases in other parts of the Middle East. But yes, we definitely see Turkish territory all over.
But these are countries that don't really have a stable or functioning government. Do you think they would approach European countries the same way? Or wouldn't that be possible?
What you say is very true. And I mentioned that they are exploiting the weakness of Arab states, partly are failed states, and Yemen, for example, or even Syria and Iraq. Of course, they will be more careful with Bulgaria, with Greece. Although we see that they bought S-400 despite American displeasure. They are ready to challenge French ships along the Libyan coast. The French ships try to search Turkish vessels that they believed were carrying weapons to Libya. And the Turkish Navy intervened and allowed those ships to reach Tripoli. So there is a certain reluctance on part of European countries to start shooting, but Turks definitely flex their muscles.
I had another question, if I'm allowed to answer or ask the question.
Sure. Go.
I read something about how the Middle East don't have a core states, like United States, England, and France are core states in Europe, but the Middle East don't have one. Why isn't Turkey one? If that was understandable.
Okay, it's a different story. Turkey.
It seems like you are losing a bit connection there, Efraim.
It's a history. It has a strong state. It is a rather successful state. From the Arab world.
I'm sorry, the connection was went out. I couldn't hear your answer.
I'll try to repeat. Turkey is a state. It's a historic state.
But it's not a core state. It's not uniting other countries in the Middle East. Or am I wrong?
It ruled over the Middle East. It conquered everybody. What do you mean? It's not a core state. It is one of the three most important states in the Middle East that have a large population and they compete with each other. It's Turkey, Iran, and Egypt. This is the Middle East. All the rest, as Sadat used to say, are tribes.
There's another question in the chat. That a few days ago, we saw Turkey jet fighters breaching Greek airspace, according to media reports. How do you evaluate the chances of a war breaking out between the two countries?
Well, first of all, they are doing it all the time, since the 90s. That's nothing new. And basically they play, a chicken game. And, they try to, it's like a cat, they try to get as far as possible. If there is no opposition, they'll go on. And the Greek Air Force actually is not bad. It's a good Air Force. I know personally, but so the Greeks don't want to provoke the Turks. And they also play games with the Turks. Some of the Greek islands are just, 15, 20 kilometers from the Turkish coast. We shouldn't forget that. So, it could be a mistake on part of a pilot. What's 20 kilometers for a F-15?
So the other question was regarding the membership of Turkey in NATO. And in certain sections, I guess, of European society and American society, it's controversial that they are a member. But do you think Erdogan sees membership of NATO as a important strategic position, or do you think he is willing to sacrifice the membership?
Well, first of all, we should mention that the NATO has no mechanism to expel a member. So unless NATO will come with such mechanism, the Turks will feel safe in this organization and get all the intelligence that the organization gets, and maybe the next day it's in Tehran. Turkey is indeed in a very important strategic location. The Americans have a big air base in Incirlik, including nuclear weapons there, left from the Cold War times. NATO has another air base there, and of course, Turkish military is quite integrated with NATO forces. Turkey could be a very useful ally if it plays by NATO rules, but it doesn't.
Yeah, but how long time do you think that can go on?
You see, I come from the land of the prophets, but I'm not a prophet and not a son of a prophet. So I don't know, there are certain situations which go on for many years. It's like a couple that, fights all the time, and there is no divorce, for a variety of reasons. So, maybe they are Catholic, I don't know. So, there is no divorce mechanism in NATO, so I don't know what will happen.
No, sure.
It's a very awkward situation, definitely.
Yeah. Thanks again
for answering the questions. In Afghanistan. They are part of NATO, and for a while, a Turkish general was the commander of all NATO forces in Afghanistan, including the American forces.
Yeah, that's interesting. There was another question regarding Turkish military engagement in Libya, whether it's official forces or some private military entities from Turkey. Could you expand on that, please?
Yes, it's definitely official. The Turkish parliament approved sending Turkish soldiers to Libya. And apart from the official Turkish military, we have Turkish militias, private militias by the name of Sadat. Those militias are operated by somebody close to Erdogan. And the third component of the Turkish intervention in Libya is jihadists from Syria. Thousands of jihadists from Syria were transferred by Turkey to Libya and are fighting on the side of the Islamists in eastern Libya. So it is formal, informal, and jihadist all together under the control of Turkey.
Simon? And afterwards, Kim Freddy.
Yeah, I had a question about the refugees in Turkey, because Turkey seemed to be threatening, I don't remember if it was Europe or Greece, of opening their borders and letting hundreds of thousands of refugees into Europe. Is it, do you think they ever would do such? Because that would be catastrophic for Europe if that would happen.
Well, basically, Turkey, Erdogan blackmailed the EU and got billions of euros in order not to send the refugees.
Yeah.
Part of the refugees are being resettled in the area south of the border, in the area which I mentioned, the strip areas along the Turkish border, which is under Turkish control. And if we talk about refugees, I think one reason for Turkish interest in Libya is not only because it is challenging Egypt and it is part of the Ottoman Empire, but also Libya is a gateway for refugees coming from Africa into Europe. And they want to have a hold on this gateway as well to continue to blackmail the European Union. And they will be able to control the flow of immigrants into Europe, not only from the east, but also from across the Mediterranean.
Okay, thank you. Great answer.
There was another question from the chat. Kim Freddy asked, do Israel feel threatened by Turkey, by the Turkish leader?
Definitely. It was the first time at the beginning of this year, Israeli military intelligence issued a report mentioning Turkey as a risk, not an enemy, as a risk. I think also our Mossad director, Yossi Cohen, was quoted as saying that Turkey is actually a greater problem now than Iran. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure this is a true quote. I'm not sure that this is true. Iran is indeed a big problem, particularly because of its nuclear program and the proxies that are around Israel. But Turkey has a potential to become a formidable enemy for Israel. Mm. And we should be very careful and make the necessary preparations to contain further Turkish influence. I want to remind you that in 2010, they sent a ship, Marmara, to violate, to break the blockade of Gaza. We stopped it by force. And since then, there are no more ships. They understand the language of power. And we should make quite clear to everybody, and particularly to the Turks, that we will not hesitate to use Israeli military force to defend our interests. And I think that there is a possibility to deter the Turks from further aggression, particularly if we are able to mobilize the United States to this task. Of course, we have no illusions about Europe. Europe is not a strategic actor, unfortunately.
Mm. So good questions keep popping up in the chat. There is a question from Niels. I guess he is from Denmark by the name, but you can also live in Norway with that name, of course. Is Turkey afraid of Russia? And how long can Turkey maintain a good relation to Russia, considering the war in Libya?
Well, there is a long history between Russia and the Ottoman Empire and Turkey. They've been rivals for centuries. During the Cold War, of course, they were enemies. With the end of the Cold War, the Russian threat was greatly diminished because it's not longer, a real superpower. And I would like to mention that a few years ago, the Turks didn't hesitate to shoot down a Russian airplane in the vicinity of the Turkish-Syrian border. However, Putin explained to Erdogan that its Turkish economic interest will be harmed. There are a lot of construction companies, Turkish construction companies in Russia. There is a lot of Russian tourism to Turkey. So basically, the Turks bowed down. There was some kind of apology also. And they are rivals in Syria, they are rivals in Libya. But I think the Turks are, as I mentioned, pragmatic and careful, not to provoke too much the Russians. They play games, but basically there is a certain respect for Russian power. You know, the main weakness of Turkey today is economic, of course. So if Russia has some levers over Turkey, which I mentioned already, but there is also another one, which is energy. They get, I think, about 60% of their energy via a pipeline of the Black Sea, in the Black Sea. And they understand that they are dependent and they act correspondingly.
I see.
It's time to mention maybe that they found gas in the Black Sea. Mm-hmm. It's not clear yet how large this gas field is. It will take a few years to develop it. In any case, it has been heralded in Turkey by the government as being a very important finding, which will strengthen the position of Turkey, will bring energy independence and even greater freedom of action in the international arena.
I see. Thanks. There's another question regarding Turkey's nuclear ambitions. Do you think they have ambitions to secure nuclear weapons for themselves, or is there any news or secrets about that?
Well, I don't know Turkish secrets. In any case, they bought power reactors, nuclear power reactors from Russia, which I don't think they are a problem for nuclear proliferation, because the Russians are very good at inspecting those installations and pulling back the uranium rods which fuel those nuclear reactors. But Erdogan in last September 2019, has mentioned that he will not stay behind Iran if Iran develops a nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. And this is understandable. The clear consequence of the Iranian nuclear program is nuclear proliferation in the Middle East. We see it, I mentioned the declaration of Erdogan. I'm sure there is ongoing research in this area. There are some contacts with Korean firms to supply a complete fuel cycle to Turkey, which allows them to divert some of those materials to nuclear weapons, the fissionable materials. We see, of course, Saudi Arabia is going in that direction. UAE is going in that direction. So this is a very troublesome development in the Middle East, and the nuclear progress of Iran should be stopped as soon as possible.
Sure. I have a question regarding political freedom in Turkey, and we heard a few years ago when there was this coup that Erdogan fought back, that almost 100,000 political prisoners. Do you know the number today? And also regarding the media situation in Turkey, into what degree do you have free media coverage and internal criticism, and what could be like for our members in Norway who want to follow news from Turkey in English? What would be good sources that you could recommend?
Well, I think that Turkey has moved into authoritarian path. The largest number of journalists in jail in the world is not China, it's Turkey. The Turks, Erdogan, friends have bought most of the big media outlets. The one, for example, but others. There is not real freedom of press in Turkey. Basically everybody is afraid, journalists. Only very few courageous journalists are speaking their mind and are criticizing the government, and some of them are in jail. This is true of the NGOs, greater control by the government. Elections are still to a great extent free, but we don't know, who will count the votes at the next election. So the system allows also great authority to the president. Recently, he has transformed certain community units into a Praetorian Guard. Another organization was also established to keep the safety of the president. It's a Republican Guard, or Erdogan Guard. The Republican symbols are still there, but democracy has been greatly reduced. 20 years ago, Turkey was not a great democracy, but now the situation is much worse. As I mentioned, in the discussion before we started the talk, some of my friends are in jail. Part of them are generals, part of them are journalists, part of them are Islamists, Gulenists, for example. Fethullah Gulen, who are some kind of moderate Islam, like the Shas party in Israel. So the situation in Turkey is very bad. Some of my friends in the academia, but not only in the academia, also in other circles, banking, media, are sending their kids away to study abroad, not only to get an education abroad, but also to stay there. The largest number of foreign students in the United States is Turkish students who have no intention, most of them have no intention of going back. And this is a very sad story, because if the Kemalist elite, the secular elite, is sending their children away, basically they lost, part of them lost the hope of fighting back against the Islamic way. There is a struggle over the soul of Turkey. I don't think the struggle is over, but the situation is not rosy.
Then there is a question regarding Turkey getting the General Secretary of the UN. I haven't heard that news, and there was also a question whether Turkey are using pilots from Pakistan in their military force.
I don't know about the UN. I don't follow the UN. It's a background institution. The relations between Pakistan and Turkey are very close. For years, even during the Republican times, Mustafa Kemal, the militaries of Pakistan as well as Turkey consider themselves as modernizing institutions and as the keepers of the state. So this is a long relationship. between Pakistan and Turkey. They exchange officers in their military schools, higher military schools. They train together. So I'm not surprised that Pakistani pilots are fulfilling certain missions with the Turkish Air Force. The Turkish Air Force, by the way, is a good Air Force. And they have a very good relations with the Israeli Air Force. I personally visited once the headquarters of the Turkish Air Force for interviews when I wrote a book about Turkey-Israel relations. And I was very impressed by the Turkish officers. And the stories I heard from our officers about the Turkish pilots are very positive.
Good. That was ending on a happy note there. There are no more questions from the chat. I think it's time for us to express our deep appreciation that you were willing to set aside this evening for the members of MIFF in Norway and Denmark. And we wish you all the best. Thanks for all your work to uncover Middle East history and current events. And all you have done for academia in Israel through a long life.
I thank you for your support for Israel. You are friends of Israel, and I feel it's my duty, to give my time to
Thanks.
people like you.
That's wonderful. Okay, so litraot.